Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every story you've told yourself about your pain, every explanation, every justification has been a lie your mind constructed to keep you exactly where you are. Picture yourself in your favorite chair, suddenly understanding that your brain has been playing the most sophisticated game of deception imaginable. Not against others, but against yourself. Sigmund Freud uncovered something so disturbing about human nature that it challenges everything we believe about our own minds. Something that explains why intelligent, experienced people like yourself continue patterns that cause suffering, cling to relationships that drain you, and rationalize staying in situations that serve no one. Here's the unsettling truth Freud discovered. Your brain doesn't just experience pain, it actively protects, nurtures, and rationalizes it. Think about that person who always finds themselves in toxic relationships. Or perhaps that's you. Consider how you overthink the same regrets, replay the same betrayals, return to the same sources of disappointment. You've wondered why someone with decades of life experience continues down paths that lead nowhere good. Freud realized that our minds create elaborate defense mechanisms not to heal us, but to keep us comfortable with our familiar pain. Your psyche has been working overtime, crafting stories and creating justifications for why you should remain exactly where you are, even when where you are hurts. But why would your own mind betray you like this? The answer lies in something Freud called the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar patterns, even destructive ones. Your brain has decided that known pain is safer than unknown freedom. Consider the widow who refuses to let go of belongings not out of love, but because grief has become more familiar than new joy. The retiree who continues ruminating over workplace betrayals from decades past because anger feels more comfortable than forgiveness. The grandparent who enables adult children's dysfunction because confronting truth feels more dangerous than maintaining the lie. Freud exposed something that cuts to the core of human psychology. We don't just have pain, we develop relationships with our pain. We feed it, justify it, and protect it because our unconscious mind believes familiar suffering is preferable to unfamiliar healing. Your brain has been playing chess while you thought you were playing checkers, always staying 3 moves ahead to ensure you never actually change. This isn't about weakness or lack of intelligence. Some of the most brilliant minds in history have fallen victim to this psychological trap. Your mind has been running a background program designed not for your happiness, but for your psychological survival in a world your unconscious still perceives as dangerous. What makes this insidious is how clever these rationalizations become. Your mind creates sophisticated, seemingly logical explanations for why you should remain stuck. It transforms your pain into your identity, your trauma into your story, your limitations into your character. You're not someone who experienced betrayal. You are betrayed. You're not someone who felt lonely. You are someone who belongs alone. The question that should shake you to your core: how much of what you believe about yourself, your relationships, and your limitations has been carefully constructed by an unconscious mind more interested in keeping you safe than setting you free? How many of your deeply held beliefs about why you can't change, why you can't trust, why you can't love again, are actually psychological defense mechanisms masquerading as wisdom. If you're ready to discover why your brain has been rationalizing your pain and how to break free from this unconscious conspiracy against your happiness, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about your own mind. The roots of this psychological betrayal run deeper than most realize, beginning with a fundamental misunderstanding of what Freud actually discovered about the human psyche. When Freud introduced defense mechanisms, he wasn't describing temporary coping strategies. He was exposing permanent psychological installations that your mind builds to avoid confronting unbearable truths about reality. Carl Jung, Freud's most brilliant student before their famous split, expanded this with his concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Jung realized we don't just repress traumatic memories, we repress entire aspects of our personality that don't fit our self-image. But here's what Jung discovered that Freud missed. The pain we rationalize isn't just from past trauma. It's from the ongoing energy required to maintain these psychological defenses. Think about this. Every day, your unconscious mind works overtime to maintain a version of reality that protects you from truths you decided long ago were too dangerous to face. You're not just carrying the weight of old wounds. You're carrying the exhaustive burden of pretending those wounds don't define your every choice. Your brain has become a full-time editor of your own experience, cutting out scenes that don't match your established narrative and enhancing others that confirm your carefully constructed worldview. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher who heavily influenced Freud, understood that human beings have an almost infinite capacity for self-deception. Schopenhauer argued that the will, our deepest driving force, often works against our conscious interests. But what Schopenhauer couldn't have predicted was how sophisticated these self-deceptions would become in the modern human psyche. Your mind doesn't just lie to you. It creates entire philosophical systems to justify those lies. Consider how this manifests in your daily life. When you tell yourself you're too old to start something new, you're not making a factual assessment. You're protecting yourself from the vulnerability of potential failure. When you claim you can't trust anyone anymore after a betrayal, you're not demonstrating wisdom. You're rationalizing isolation as psychological safety. Your mind has convinced you that these limitations are insights when they're actually prisons. Friedrich Nietzsche called himself a psychologist, saw through this human tendency toward what he termed ressentiment, the way we transform our wounds into our identity and our pain into our moral superiority. Nietzsche realized that people often prefer to suffer magnificently rather than heal quietly, because suffering becomes a source of meaning and identity. Your pain isn't just something you experience, it becomes something you are, and your mind will fight to preserve that identity even when it destroys your happiness. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, discovered something even more disturbing in the concentration camps. People could find meaning in almost any form of suffering, even the most senseless. But Frankl also realized the dark side of this human capacity. We can become so invested in the meaning we've created from our pain that we become afraid to let go of the pain itself. The meaning we've built around our suffering becomes more important than the suffering's resolution. This is where Freud's insight becomes truly unsettling. Your unconscious mind isn't just protecting you from external threats, it's protecting you from the threat of change itself. The psychological energy required to maintain your defense mechanisms has become so automatic, so integral to your sense of self, that your mind perceives healing as a form of death. To your unconscious, the person you would become without this pain is a stranger, and strangers are dangerous. Jean-Paul Sartre captured this phenomenon in his concept of bad faith, the way we lie to ourselves about our own freedom and responsibility. Sartre realized that people often choose to see themselves as victims of circumstances rather than agents of change, because agency requires the terrifying acknowledgement that we could have chosen differently all along. Your mind rationalizes your pain because admitting you could heal implies you could have healed sooner. And that admission threatens the entire story you've told yourself about who you are. But here's what makes this psychological trap so insidious. Your defense mechanisms don't just protect you from pain, they protect you from pleasure, joy, and connection as well. Because if you can feel deeply negative emotions, you can feel deeply positive ones too. And your unconscious mind has decided that emotional numbness is safer than emotional vulnerability. Your brain has chosen familiar misery over unfamiliar ecstasy. This is why simply telling someone to let go or move on is not just useless, it's cruel. You're not holding on to pain because you want to suffer. You're holding on to pain because your unconscious mind believes that suffering is the only thing standing between you and complete psychological annihilation. Your brain has convinced you that your pain is not just part of your story, it is your story, and without it, there would be no you left to tell. This psychological rationalization doesn't just affect your internal world. It silently reshapes your entire external reality. Your unconscious mind begins orchestrating your life like a master puppeteer, ensuring that every choice you make reinforces the very suffering you claim you want to escape. Your brain actively filters reality to confirm your pain-based beliefs. It's called confirmation bias, but in this context, it becomes something far more sinister. Your mind seeks experiences that confirm what you already suffer. You begin unconsciously gravitating toward people who will betray you, situations that will disappoint you. Consider your daily interactions. You meet someone new, and within minutes, your unconscious mind is scanning for signs of potential hurt or rejection. Not because you're wise, but because finding those signs allows you to retreat back into justified isolation. Your brain creates self-fulfilling prophecies that prove your pain-based worldview correct. Neuroscientist Rick Hansen discovered that our brains have a negativity bias. We're wired to notice negative experiences more intensely than positive ones. When you combine this with decades of rationalized pain, your brain becomes a sophisticated early warning system that sees danger everywhere, even in genuine opportunities for healing. This creates learned hopelessness. Your unconscious mind has gathered so much evidence that pain is inevitable, betrayal is certain, disappointment is guaranteed, that it stops looking for alternatives. It's not that you can't change. Your brain has become convinced that change itself is self-deception. The social consequences become devastating as you age. People sense your unconscious resistance to joy, your subtle sabotage of positive experiences, your inability to fully receive love or success. they begin treating you exactly as your unconscious mind expects, with distance, caution, or superficial kindness. Most tragically, this pattern affects the people you love. Your adult children walk on eggshells around your sensitivities. Your friends stop sharing good news because they've learned you can't fully celebrate with them. Your partner begins withholding their authentic self because they've learned that your pain is more comfortable for you than their love. We live in a society that has monetized psychological pain, from social media algorithms that feed on outrage to news cycles that profit from anxiety. Your unconscious addiction to familiar pain makes you the perfect consumer for a culture that sells solutions to problems it has no interest in solving. But here's the most insidious consequence. This pattern becomes your legacy. The unconscious ways you've learned to rationalize pain become the unspoken lessons you pass on to the next generation. Your children and grandchildren inherit your psychological defense mechanisms, your relationship with suffering, your unconscious beliefs about what's possible. Every day you spend unconsciously rationalizing your pain is another day your brain becomes more convinced that pain is your natural state. The invisible war in your unconscious mind isn't just affecting your happiness, it's determining your legacy. The path to psychological freedom begins with a radical shift. You must learn to become suspicious of your own mind, particularly when it offers perfectly reasonable explanations for why you should remain exactly as you are. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about developing what Carl Jung called psychological sovereignty. The first act of rebellion is noticing the stories your mind tells you. Every time you catch yourself explaining why you can't trust, why you shouldn't try, why you're too old or too hurt to be vulnerable again, pause and ask, who benefits from this story? You'll notice there's a part of your psyche that profits from your limitation, that gains identity from your wound. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about becoming a person who gives style to their character, someone who takes responsibility for shaping their own psychological landscape, rather than accepting whatever patterns were carved by circumstance and trauma. But you can't simply decide to stop rationalizing your pain. You have to understand why your mind started doing it, and then offer it something better. Your unconscious defense mechanisms aren't your enemy. They're outdated security systems that once kept you safe, but now keep you imprisoned. Viktor Frankl discovered that concentration camp survivors weren't necessarily the physically strongest, but those who maintained what he called the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose their response to circumstances. You may not control what thoughts your unconscious produces, but you can choose how to respond to them. The most counterintuitive aspect of psychological liberation is that it requires compassion for the part of yourself that has been rationalizing your pain. Most people try to fight their defense mechanisms through willpower, but your unconscious mind interprets this as an attack and doubles down on protective strategies. Instead, approach your own psyche like a hostage negotiator. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free. We have no choice but to choose. The most radical act of rebellion is making choices that assume healing is possible, even when you don't believe it yet. Choose to respond to kindness as if it's genuine. Pursue opportunities as if you deserve them. Love as if your heart won't inevitably be broken. Eleanor Roosevelt struggled with profound insecurity well into middle age, but didn't overcome her patterns by denying them. She chose to act as if she were already the person she wanted to become, developing what psychologists call behavioral courage. The practical work begins with developing metacognition. Thinking about thinking. Pay attention to the voice that offers reasons why you shouldn't change, shouldn't trust, shouldn't hope. Notice how sophisticated this voice sounds, how it uses your own intelligence against you. Recognize this voice not as wisdom, but as a psychological strategy to avoid vulnerability. One powerful tool is behavioral experiments. Instead of trying to convince your mind that change is possible, conduct small experiments that provide your brain with new data. Respond differently to one interaction. Take one small risk you'd normally avoid. Accept one invitation your defense mechanisms tell you to decline. The rebellion ultimately requires recognizing that your current identity, including your relationship with your pain, is not fixed, but fluid and changeable. You are not your history, trauma, limitations, or fears. You are the awareness that observes all of these things, and that awareness has the power to choose which aspects of your experience to feed. The most radical realization is that your pain was never protecting you from anything real. It was protecting you from discovering who you might become without it. Here's the truth that will fundamentally alter how you understand not just your pain, but human consciousness itself. Your brain doesn't rationalize pain to protect you from the world. It rationalizes pain to protect you from the terrifying magnitude of your own unlived life. Freud never fully grasped this because he focused on what people were running from rather than what they were running toward. What you've been unconsciously avoiding isn't more pain, it's more life. Your mind has spent decades convincing you that staying small, staying hurt, staying stuck is wisdom, when it's actually cosmic waste. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote about the unlived life. Jung realized that our greatest fear isn't death. It's recognizing how much life we've left unlived, how much love we've left ungiven, how much potential we've left unexplored. Think about this. You are reading these words at an age when you have something most younger people lack: the perspective to recognize what truly matters, and freedom from many obligations that once constrained your choices. You have survived decades of experiences that gave you wisdom, resilience, and emotional depth your younger self couldn't imagine. You are not too old, too damaged, or too late. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. The truth about your relationship with pain will follow this pattern. First, your mind will ridicule the idea that you've been unconsciously choosing limitation. Then, it will violently oppose attempts to change. Finally, you will reach the stage where the truth becomes self-evident. You've been far more powerful than your pain ever allowed you to believe. But here's the most profound realization. Your pain was never actually about the events that hurt you. It was about the meaning you created from those events, and meaning can be changed. Every story you've told yourself about why you are the way you are, why you can't trust, why you must remain guarded, these are not facts about reality. They are interpretations you created when you were younger, more vulnerable, and operating with less information. Viktor Frankl discovered that people who found meaning in even senseless suffering were the ones who survived and thrived. But people who create meaning from their pain often become so attached to that meaning that they resist healing, because healing threatens the identity they've built around their wound. The supreme truth is this: at your age, with your experience, with your understanding of how quickly life passes and how precious each day is, you have the opportunity to make a choice that younger people cannot fully appreciate. You can choose to spend whatever time you have left finally discovering what you're actually capable of when you stop using your intelligence to rationalize your limitations and start using it to explore your possibilities. This doesn't mean denying your past or pretending your wounds don't exist. It means recognizing that your wounds were never meant to become your permanent address. They were meant to be the raw material from which you crafted a deeper, more compassionate, more authentic version of yourself. Your pain was never your truth. It was the catalyst for discovering what your truth actually is. The most beautiful aspect of this realization is that it's never too late, because the present moment, this moment, right now, as you process these words, is the only moment in which change is ever possible. Your past exists only in memory. Your future exists only in imagination. But your power to choose a different response, to tell a different story, to take a different action, exists only here, only now. You are not reading these words by accident. Something in you knows it's time to stop rationalizing the pain and start actualizing the possibility. The question is not whether you're capable of change. The question is whether you're finally ready to discover what you've been capable of all along. The person you were always meant to become has been waiting patiently inside you, behind all the defenses, beyond all the stories, beneath all the pain. That person is still there. That person is still possible. That person is still you. Subscribe to this channel and leave a like if you're ready to finally meet the person you were always meant to be. And share in the comments what part of your story you're ready to rewrite in this chapter of your life.